The streets in London on certain days of the week are not in control of Mayor Khan. They're in control of the mob, the raging mob.
Lee Anderson confronts SADIQ KHAN after controversial remarks spark public outrage. You're not going to believe how quickly this story spiraled. Honestly, while everyone was arguing about tax cuts, immigration numbers, and the latest party polls, something else was bubbling under the surface, something that exploded the moment Lee Anderson stepped in front of a camera. One moment, it was just another political soundbite from the London mayor. The next moment, social media lit up, inboxes flooded, and suddenly Lee Anderson was standing center stage, ready to push back in a way only he can. And you could feel it, the tension, the frustration, the "wait, did he really say that?" energy spreading across the country. So let's get into it. It all began after one of SADIQ Khan's recent interviews, the kind that tries to address national mood, inequality, class, and the complicated web of British politics. But somewhere in that long conversation, a line dropped, a line many people felt landed badly. It wasn't that Khan set out to insult anyone. It wasn't direct. It wasn't targeted. But the phrasing, that's what people jumped on. It gave room for interpretation, room for backlash, room for people to feel like a certain group was being spoken about in a way that felt, well, dismissive. Within minutes, the clip was everywhere. Twitter, Facebook, TikTok. People were sharing it with captions like, "Did he really just say this? This feels out of touch. Someone needs to respond to this." And someone did. Lee Anderson reacts fast, firm, and direct. When Lee Anderson sits down to record a response, you know it's not going to be sugar-coated, and it's not going to be vague. He came in with a tone that wasn't angry, but wasn't soft either. A tone that said, "No, hold on, we're not letting this slide." His first line set the tone. When the people you represent feel unheard, you don't get to brush that off. And that line hit hard. Because whether you agree with Anderson or not, one thing is undeniable: he has nailed the political art of tapping into the emotional pulse of ordinary people. He didn't accuse. He didn't escalate. He didn't use damaging language. He simply reframed the moment. If people felt disrespected, then the remarks weren't delivered responsibly. Simple, clear, powerful. And with that, the conversation shifted. It wasn't about the clip anymore. It wasn't about the exact words Khan used. It was about public perception and whether leaders truly understand the communities they talk about. This is where things really exploded. Comments poured in across platforms. One user wrote, "This is why people don't trust politicians anymore: too much talking, not enough understanding." Another said, "Lee Anderson is saying exactly what many of us were thinking." And a third countered, "People are twisting Khan's message. They're missing the intention." So the reaction wasn't one-sided, far from it. But it was intense. A political correspondent described the situation like this: "This is the type of moment that exposes deep political fault lines. You can see where people stand within seconds of reading the comments." Even insiders weighed in. A Labour aide reportedly said, "This isn't ideal timing. We didn't expect this soundbite to become the story." On the other side, a Conservative strategist remarked, "Anderson knows how to ride a wave. He turned a small spark into a national debate." That's exactly what happened. A single moment became a national conversation about class, respect, political tone, and who gets to define the lived experience of British communities. Let's be honest. This isn't about Anderson versus Khan. This is about something much larger. How leaders speak about ordinary people. How communities feel portrayed by those in power. And how quickly public trust can be shaken by the wrong phrase at the wrong time. Because in British politics, tone is everything. People don't just listen to what politicians say, they listen to how they say it. And when anything even sounds dismissive of everyday life, or out of touch with working communities, it hits differently. It hits harder. That's why Anderson's response cut through so quickly. It wasn't policy. It wasn't statistics. It was emotion, raw and direct. Exactly what modern audiences react to. A senior journalist covering Westminster summed it up bluntly: "This is not going to die down quickly." Another insider added, "Expect rebuttals, clarifications, maybe even a follow-up interview from the mayor."
Why?
Because once the public gets emotionally invested, politicians can't just move on. Not anymore. Not in the digital age where every clip, every sentence, every pause can be replayed, reinterpreted, and reignited. This moment hit a nerve. Anderson amplified it. Khan will likely have to address it again. And voters, the people who feel this conversation directly, are watching the fallout closely. So what happens next? That's the big question. Will Khan clarify his remarks to reset the tone? Will Anderson double down with a longer explanation? Will this escalate into a full-scale parliamentary back and forth? Or, and this is the part that worries insiders, will this spark a wider conversation about how political leaders frame class, identity, and community in the UK? Because sometimes, it's the small remarks that lead to the biggest debates. And right now, this story is nowhere near finished. Forget the headlines for a second. Forget the political teams, the soundbites, the social media drama. At the heart of this moment is one simple question. Do people feel seen and respected by the leaders who speak on their behalf? If the answer is yes, the story fades. If the answer is no, the story grows. And right now, the story is growing. What happens next may be the real turning point, and if this is just the beginning, then British politics is in for a much louder, much more emotional conversation in the weeks ahead.